So we're going to transition now to Dr. Susan Hockfield. Susan was president of this institution from 2004 to 2012. And in that role, she brought important changes to MIT. Amongst them was the recognition that there was a lot of interest and activity at the intersection of life science, engineering, and the physical sciences, and that activity could be organized in more productive ways to approach big problems facing humankind, including energy and cancer. And in my very first discussions with Susan, we began to talk about what opportunities might exist there for cancer. And thanks to her efforts over many years, this building is the product of that. So we at the Koch Institute are tremendously grateful to Susan for helping us do what we have achieved and will achieve in the future. Susan is currently doing many important worldly things, like serving as director of General Electric and Qualcomm and the World Economic Forum and many other impressive titles. But most impressive to me, she has chosen to have her office here in the Koch Institute on the 4th floor, where my office is. And therefore, I get to ask her questions and get support nearly on a daily basis. Susan Hockfield.
Thanks, Tyler. Tyler, thank you for that generous introduction. I consider it one of the privileges of my life to have my office in this building in my post-presidential period. And it is always not just inspiring and awe-striking, but to see what's going on in this building, I feel like I haven't accomplished nearly enough in my lifetime to merit an office here. But it's great to be here and be part of the Koch Institute for Integrative Cancer Research. Marge gave a fabulous, not just introduction, but a brilliant description of where cancer research is today. So I'm just going to decorate her talk a little bit. I have very little to add from that fantastic description of where we are and where we need to go. She mentioned collaboration any number of times. I'm a huge believer in collaboration. Easy to say, hard to do. Hard to do because the structures of our institutions, the structure of our funding agencies, the structures of how we think about the world are fixed in our minds. And there's a certain cadence to how we get our work done that, let's just say, doesn't always lend itself to changing the way we have our conversations. Doesn't lend itself to changing the way we walk around during the day. Doesn't lend itself to changing the way we think about problems. Well, when I first started as president of MIT, I had a conversation with Tyler Jacks that opened a world to me that I only had had a glimpse of before, and I found myself in the midst. And it was this convergence of biology with engineering and the physical sciences that I kind of had a sense was happening before I arrived on this campus. And I arrived here, and it was not just happening, but happening at a level that I had never anticipated. Tyler described 2 recently gotten grants from the National Cancer Institute that brought engineers and biologists together to tackle cancer. In talking to the Dean of Engineering then, Tom Magnanti, he told me that 1/3 of the faculty in the School of Engineering at MIT were using the life sciences, using biology in their work. Fantastic. And yet, the School of Engineering sat in one place. The School of Science sat in another place. And as Tyler contemplated a new home for cancer research at MIT, he imagined a building that would include the 12 cancer biologists who then comprised the Center for Cancer Research. Now, as a biologist, I understood the role of MIT in the molecular biology revolution. I also understood the role of MIT Center for Cancer Research in bringing about that extraordinary revolution. However, when I talk to people about my coming to MIT, they often say, but you're a biologist. Do they do biology at MIT? And then when I started to talk about cancer research, people say, well, do they do cancer research at MIT? I often describe my coming to MIT as people, thought about, focused, of course, on my being the first woman president. And I pointed out that being the first woman president at MIT was a lot less disruptive than being the first biologist president. In any case, the history of cancer research at MIT really predates the war on cancer because there were people beginning to think about what cancer was as a disease. And in 1974, MIT opened the Center for Cancer Research with Salvador Luria as its director with the express purpose to begin to unravel the biology of cancer. This was a new approach at the time, entirely new approach. And yet MIT had decided actually in the 1950s to change its biology department from kind of a standard biology department studying any number of ways of thinking about biology to a biology department that focused monomaniacally on the newly emerging world of molecular biology. So MIT was positioned to have an impact not just in molecular biology, but also in cancer research. So the Center for Cancer Research was established in 1974. 12 cancer biologists were brought in or brought from the Department of Biology to sit in the Center for Cancer Research. And with the goal of understanding the basic biology of cancer research, this was an enormous success. Of those 12 faculty originally recruited to this center, 4 have won the Nobel Prize so far for their insights into the biological mechanisms of cancer. I say 4 so far because the other 8, they may prove their worth. In any case, when I arrived, Tyler and his colleagues were planning a new building. They sorely needed a state-of-the-art facility to pursue their cancer research, and it made sense to think modestly of a new building that would give these 12 cancer biologists and their teams a place to apply state-of-the-art understanding to the problem of cancer. But I was totally overwhelmed by the real vision that Tyler put before me, which is that it's not just biologists who are in the fight. We've got engineers who are in the fight. We're working with clinicians who are in the fight. And I asked the very simple question of, well, if you're all working together, shouldn't we be thinking about a new building that would allow you all to actually be together? And Tyler instantly saw some of the consequences of this, which is, let's see, that would be a faculty twice the size and a building twice the size and a bill twice the size. And there was some amount of concern whether we could actually make this place happen. Fast forward to 2010, 2011, we dedicated the building and moved in. 750 people working in the building now. In this building, about half the people are the cancer biologists from the Center for Cancer Research. Half are engineers, handpicked from, I think, 4 or 5 different engineering departments at MIT to actually live here, work here together. Every floor has a mix of biologists and engineers. We were adamant that there would be, let's just say, a bit of social engineering, forced conversations that we believed that would lead to collaborations at an entirely different order from what had been possible before. Indeed, there's one place to eat. We have one cafe. We have one set of elevators. We have one set of restrooms per floor. A stairwell between floors. And when I moved into my new office here now, just over a year ago, what I saw I was entirely unprepared for, because I knew that what we had done was a good thing. What not I, but Tyler and the people in this building have created is a totally amazing thing. The faculty, the students, the staff who are members of this Koch Institute have leapt into this new collaborative playground with an enthusiasm and a level of productivity I could never have dreamed of. I'm spending some of my time now going around from faculty member to faculty member, finding out what they're working on. My first question is, what does being in this building mean to you? And every single one looks at me as though this is the stupidest question they have ever been asked, and it well may be. And they follow it with something along the lines of, being in this building has changed my life. I'm doing experiments I could never have dreamed of. I'm working with collaborators I never imagined I would work with, and I'm working on a problem and see potential advances against this problem that I never thought possible. So what I'm going to do is give you 3 little snapshots of the kind of work that's going on in this building related to ovarian cancer, but I could give you several dozen other stories that are as inspiring and as promising. I give full credit to Tyler Jacks, who is one of the great academic leaders, because as I say, saying collaboration is easy. Making collaboration happen requires a huge amount of effort, a huge amount of vision, great intelligence, and let's just say a huge amount of persuasive power, all of which Tyler has accomplished. So when we think about ovarian cancer, it is a daunting disease. The 5-year survival rate is less than 50%. It is not a death sentence, but boy, those are not great odds. And there are a lot of problems. And for those of you who were here for today's amazing symposium, I will be repeating some of what you've heard, but I have to say, I can hear this stuff repeated 3 or 4 times before I think I really understood it. So, I will, hopefully not bore you by repeating some of the things you already heard today. So ovarian cancer is a difficult disease. It's diagnosed late. It's diagnosed late, cancer has an amazing property of being very difficult to treat. Surgery is important, but in doing surgery, you've got to find all the cancer cells, a difficult problem. Treatment is difficult. Treatment is toxic, and people often, women, develop resistance to the cancer therapies. So there are a lot of just problems in addressing cancer research. The standard kind of molecular biological approach to cancer has been, we're going to find the gene and then develop a drug against that gene. And that approach has been increasingly productive, but man, it's slow. Marge talked about Gleevec. Herceptin is another great targeted cancer story. But the time between the discovery of the HER2 gene, which is aberrant in some forms of breast cancer, and Herceptin, the targeted therapy against those kinds of cancers, was almost 20 years. Too darn slow. The other thing that happens is once you have a therapy, actually figuring out how to deliver the cancer to the therapy to the cancer cells can be very, very difficult. And it's one of the great problems in ovarian cancer. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit. So let me just describe 3 of the approaches to ovarian cancer that are being pursued here. One is inhibitory RNA, which Marge described. The problem with inhibitory RNA is actually getting it to where it needs to go. RNAs are actually one of the great dangers for animals, for animal cells. And so nature has designed any number of ways to get rid of RNAs. So it's very hard to get an RNA to someplace in the body because there are all kinds of defenses that are lined up to get rid of it. So one of the approaches that's being pursued by Sangeeta Bhatia here in this building and her colleagues is to actually disguise these inhibitory RNAs, by Sangeeta Bhatia and also Paula Hammond, disguise these RNAs with envelopes, with coverings that disguise them so that they can find their way to the cancer before being revealed for what they are, inhibitory RNAs that can kill cancer cells. But this kind of designing of the covering, the stealth clothing for these siRNAs is not a problem for biologists. It's a problem for engineers. But the engineers can't approach that problem without understanding the biology of the siRNAs. So this is a perfect opportunity for what goes on in this building, collaboration between scientists, engineers, and clinicians to attack it. That's one kind of approach. The second kind of approach, and again, for those of you who were here today, understand that first-line therapy for ovarian cancer is surgery. Going into the abdominal cavity, this sac that contains all of our abdominal organs, and actually finding the cancer and removing it. Well, right now, the way that's done is by eye. You see a thing, you take it out. But you can't visualize tumors that are very, very small. And so Angela Belcher, also in this building, working with, I think all these collaborations have been done with Mike Beerer at MGH at the Partners Medical Complex and the Dana-Farber Harvard Cancer Center. And what Angie Belcher has been working on is a way to actually visualize very, very small tumors using carbon nanotubes. I would say one of the most adored bits of nanoengineering, and pairing them with ways of visualizing these carbon nanotubes, and pairing that with viruses that can actually target the cancer cells, and an entirely new way of visualizing cancer up close, impersonal in the OR that she's developed with her colleagues out at the Lincoln Laboratory. So many of you know the Lincoln Laboratory is a place that does a lot of defense-based research. Well, Angie's been involved in that kind of research, and she's very familiar with the kind of technologies out there, and she's been able to import those technologies into this incredible new way of enhancing cancer diagnosis and finding cancers and actually removing them. The third technology that's under development here is an improvement to the delivery of cancer chemotherapy. So how do you treat a cancer that's inside a sac, right? Your abdominal cavity. Well, you can just put a lot of cancer drug in that cavity and let it slosh around for a while, and then have it taken away. The problem is that this is a not optimally designed therapy. An optimally designed therapy would be present over a very, very long period of time at a level of drug that would be enough to kill the cancer cells, but not enough to kill or damage the other organs that are sitting in that abdominal cavity. So this has been a real problem for intraperitoneal ovarian cancer therapy. What's been under development now is a different way of delivering cancer chemotherapy to those ovarian cancer cells, being developed by Mike Sema here and with Mike Bearer again at the Dana-Farber Harvard Cancer Center. And what Mike Sema has designed, is a small pump that can deliver drug over a very, very long period of time. That pump can be implanted in the peritoneal cavity, in the abdominal cavity, and over a very long period of time will release the drug at a high enough level to kill the cancer cells, but not so high a level that it damages the kidney, the GI system, the other organs that are sitting in the abdominal cavity. Now, I would say once again, these are not projects. None of these is a project that could be done by an engineer alone, or by a biologist alone, or by a clinician alone. And one of the very great challenges we face here at the Koch, but actually across the battlefield against cancer, is how we bring these people together in ways that make sense, and make sense early on, that allow us to accelerate the progress of cancer treatment from bench to bedside. George Schultz, who is an MIT alumnus, he got his PhD in economics here, has a marvelous saying. He said, if you want to land together, you've got to take off together. And it certainly makes a huge difference when you're designing these kinds of very, very complex therapies. So what we are working on here is help making it possible for people to take off together so that we can land together. Marge mentioned private philanthropy. I just want to put in one word for that. Private philanthropy is always important. It is absolutely critical for the kinds of projects I just described. Absolutely critical. Our funding agencies are organized around disciplines, so they're disciplinarily constrained. And they are not organized across institutions. So when you want to cross disciplines and when you want to cross institutions, it is very difficult to secure standard kinds of funding. So private philanthropy has been absolutely key to getting these early stage technologies off the ground. The other thing, that much as we wish that review boards could have a lot of alacrity and really understand what the next frontier is, they're just not so good at that. And I think they're not so good at it probably for very good reasons. You've got 15 smart people sitting around a table and there's a new idea that no one's heard of before, very hard for those 15 people to agree. However, when you're sitting in the Koch Institute and Tyler Jacks, the director, can put 2 or 3 faculty together who understand what this new frontier looks like, you can make the decisions pretty fast and relatively accurately. So private philanthropy is absolutely critical for making the impossible possible in the context of our battle against cancer. I want to thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you for your interest. Thank you for your enthusiasm. And I can tell you that the people in this building are working as hard as they can to create the future that Marge described, a future where cancer is no longer the dreaded disease. Thanks very much.